ABC General Hospital, spoilers for Tuesday. February 24 reveal that Cullum's calculated maneuver forced Jason into a tightening corner, the kind of trap only someone with precise knowledge of his instincts could design. For years, Jason had survived by anticipating danger before it fully emerged, but Cullum exploited that strength, constructing a situation where every path forward carried a consequence Jason could not ignore. At the center of the unfolding chaos was Britt, whose sudden reappearance in Port Charles had already stirred old emotions and unresolved tensions. Yet now she found herself ensnared in a threat far more vicious than anything she expected. A threat that grew sharper each time Cullum made another silent move behind the scenes. Britt sensed the danger circling her long before she could name it, feeling its weight in the way strangers lingered too long, in the subtle tracking of her every step, in the paranoia creeping into moments that should have felt safe. And the more she felt hunted, the more Jason realized that Cullum was no longer trying to punish him indirectly. He was going after someone Jason could not and would not lose again. This forced Jason to confront a truth he hated. His current strategy was failing. Every attempt to stay ahead was met with Cullum's counteraction, as if the man was reading his thoughts, twisting them into weapons. Jason understood that Cullum wasn't merely trying to corner him. He was testing him, mapping his reactions, pushing him toward decisions that would compromise his leverage and leave Britt exposed. If Jason stayed on his current course, Cullum would win not by force but by manipulation, dismantling Jason's stability one piece at a time. And the danger Britt faced was escalating faster than anyone expected. Each incident grew bolder, more invasive, more undeniably intentional, signaling that Cullum was preparing for something larger, something explosive. Britt felt the shift in Jason as clearly as she felt the threat closing in. His calm was tighter, controlled to the point of strain. Every step he took seemed laced with calculation, as though he were rehearsing 10 possible escape routes at once. For Jason, this wasn't just protection anymore, it was survival. Cullum had transformed the situation into a psychological battlefield, forcing Jason to confront both his past failures and his deepest fears. Losing Britt once had nearly broken him. Losing her again in a game designed by someone like Cullum would destroy more than his resolve. It would destroy the part of him that still believed he could outrun the darkness tied to his name. Realizing the scope of Cullum's intentions pushed Jason into a decisive shift. The passive defense had to end. Protecting Britt meant abandoning caution and adopting a plan. Cullum would never anticipate something aggressive, unpredictable, and dangerously out of character. To save her, Jason needed to move first strike before Cullum tightened the trap. The new plan forming in his mind was risky, reckless, and the kind of maneuver that could cost him everything if miscalculated. But the stakes had transformed. Cullum wasn't just threatening Jason's life. He was targeting Jason's heart. And for the first time in years, Jason understood that protecting Britt required more than strength. It required outthinking a man who had built an entire strategy around knowing his every move. The explosion building beneath the surface was inevitable, and Jason could feel the countdown speeding up. Britt was in real danger, Cullum was tightening his grip, and Jason had no choice left but to change everything before the entire situation erupted beyond control. Jordan's warning hit Curtis with the weight of a truth he had been trying to avoid. A truth he feared would destroy the fragile balance he had rebuilt. She spoke with the calm urgency of someone who had seen too many people lose everything because they ignored the signs that were right in front of them. And Curtis, despite his efforts to remain rational, felt the ground beneath him shift as her words forced him to acknowledge what his instincts had been whispering for 2 weeks. Portia was hiding something again. The unease started as a tremor, small inconsistencies in her behavior, sudden defensiveness, the way she changed the subject whenever certain topics were mentioned. But Jordan's warning transformed that tremor into a shockwave, compelling him to confront the possibility that Portia's deception might cut far deeper than he imagined. For Curtis, betrayal was not new, but the idea that Portia might be repeating old patterns shattered something inside him, stirring memories of old wounds that had never truly healed. Jordan could see the shift in his eyes the moment disbelief turned into painful clarity, and she knew the storm she had unleashed was only beginning. Curtis now stood at the edge of a truth he wasn't sure he wanted to uncover. But the instinct to protect himself and those he loved was stronger than denial. Whatever Portia was hiding, whatever she feared he would discover, was about to come crashing into the open. And Curtis realized that the answers he sought could unravel not only his marriage but the fragile trust he had fought so hard to rebuild. The shock forming in his chest wasn't just about Portia's possible lies, it was about the dawning realization that this time the consequences might be far more devastating than either of them expected. Although Sunny and Rick have never shared the warmth or trust typical of brothers, fate has a way of forcing unexpected alliances at the worst and most necessary moments. Sunny, a man built on control, intimidation, and instinct, finds himself standing on unfamiliar ground as the walls Sidwell has constructed begin tightening around him. For the first time in years, Sunny feels the pressure of a threat that cannot simply be crushed or negotiated away. Sidwell strikes with precision, targeting the blind spot Sonny didn't realize he still carried. And the weight of that vulnerability pushes Sonny toward the last person he ever imagined turning to: Rick. The moment Sonny finally sits across from him, stripped of bravado and forced into honesty, the tension between them thickens like smoke. Rick senses the shift immediately. Sonny isn't here to posture, threaten, or manipulate. He's here because he's cornered. Rick has spent a lifetime standing in the shadow of Sonny's empire, resenting him, envying him, fighting him. And yet some part of him always remained tethered by blood, by memory, by a loyalty he tried desperately to bury. Hearing Sonny admit the severity of Sidwell's threat is nothing short of staggering. What shocks Rick even more is the quiet desperation beneath his brother's voice, a rare glimpse into Sonny's fear. Something Rick has only ever imagined. And suddenly Rick is confronted with a choice he never expected to face: turn his back and let Sonny fall. Or step into the fire and stand beside a man he has spent half his life hating. Against every instinct, Rick chooses the latter. He knows the law, knows strategy, knows how to dismantle a predator from the inside out, and Sidwell dangerous. Calculating, untouchable, presents a challenge Rick cannot ignore. Helping Sonny means confronting their fractured history, reopening wounds that never healed, and risking being consumed by Sonny's world all over again. But the magnitude of Sidwell's threat, the potential fallout for those Sonny protects, and the sheer brutality of what's coming forces Rick into a role he never expected to play: Sonny's shield instead of his enemy. What follows is a moment of electrifying tension. Two brothers, united not by affection but by necessity. Rick leans in, his expression cold and resolved, and for the first time Sonny sees not a rival, not a mistake, but a man capable of standing beside him in a war that could consume Port Charles. Their alliance is fragile, volatile, and unpredictable, but it is also powerful in a way neither of them expected. And as they prepare to confront Sidwell together, one thing becomes clear: the shock isn't just that Rick is willing to help Sonny. The real shock is that Sonny finally accepts he cannot win this battle alone. The discovery could not have come at a more dangerous moment. Lucas, almost by accident, stumbled upon something priceless: the exact medication that Britt had been relying on in secret. A formula she never disclosed fully to anyone, not even to those closest to her. At first, Lucas didn't understand the significance. It looked like nothing more than a misfiled vial tucked into a small case. But the label, the dosage pattern, and the unfamiliar compound name told him immediately that this was no ordinary prescription. The implication struck him fast and hard. Whatever Britt was taking, whatever she was hiding, it was not standard treatment. And now that the drug was in Lucas's possession, the door to a truth long buried was finally unlocked. Lucas knew the risks, but his instincts as both a doctor and a brother surged forward. The medication could explain Britt's worsening condition, her erratic symptoms, even the fear she tried to conceal behind practiced confidence. If the formula was harmful, experimental, or far worse, manipulated by someone with an agenda, then every second counted. The only way to protect her was to uncover exactly what was in that vial. Sending it for laboratory analysis wasn't just a choice, it became a duty. And yet Lucas also recognized the storm this decision could unleash. Testing the drug meant exposing secrets Britt might have died trying to keep hidden. It also meant inviting attention from people who might not want those results to come to light. As he held the vial beneath the harsh fluorescent glow of the hospital corridor, Lucas felt the weight of the moment press against him. If Britt had been endangered, someone was responsible, and the list of possibilities stretched uncomfortably far. The lab report could confirm sabotage, negligence, or a medical cover-up tied to a much larger conspiracy. It could point to someone intentionally weakening Britt, controlling her, or preparing her for something far more sinister. The truth curled like smoke in his mind, forming shapes he wasn't ready to see. But he knew one thing with absolute clarity: testing this medication would shift the balance of power in Port Charles. And that was exactly why he had to do it. By choosing to move forward, Lucas set into motion a chain reaction that would not only expose what Britt had been fighting alone, but also force others, Jason, Anna, even Sidwell's inner circle, into the fallout. The results of that test could rewrite alliances, ignite new hostilities, and reveal a threat none of them had anticipated. Lucas didn't want to become the center of another medical nightmare, but fate had placed the evidence in his hands. And now every step he took would determine whether Britt's suffering ended or whether the danger surrounding her exploded into something Port Charles could no longer contain. Lulu had every reason to hesitate, every reason to pull back emotionally before crossing a line she couldn't undo. Nathan's renewed presence in Port Charles brought with it a powerful wave of old emotion, affection, loyalty, unresolved longing that hit her harder than she expected. Despite everything that had happened, despite the pieces of her life that shattered and rebuilt over the years, Nathan's quiet devotion was still there, steady and unwavering. It unsettled her in ways she didn't want to admit. Lulu could feel the weight of his feelings every time he looked at her, and that weight forced her to stand still, to question whether stepping toward him again would heal something inside her or reopen wounds she had fought so hard to close. But everything shifted the moment Maxie returned. Maxie's arrival didn't just complicate the delicate emotional balance, it detonated it. Her return brought memories rushing back for everyone involved, love that was once unquestionable, pain buried under years of distance, and a connection that never truly died. Lulu could see it instantly. Nathan's expression changed the second Maxie stepped into the room, sharp and ignited, stirred by old loyalty and a history neither of them had resolved. And in that moment, Lulu understood something she had been avoiding. Whatever Nathan felt for her, whatever possibility had existed in that fragile space between them, Maxie's presence rearranged everything. Now there was a shift in the air, a recalibration of emotions and alliances that Lulu could feel deep in her chest. Maxie's return meant Nathan wasn't simply choosing between past and present, he was forced to confront unresolved pieces of his heart. And Lulu, caught in the middle of the emotional collision, suddenly found herself reconsidering her own role in this unfolding story. For the first time, she realized that Nathan's affection, though genuine, might not be rooted in the future at all. It was tied to confusion, loneliness, ghost of what once was. Maxie's reappearance exposed those shadows and illuminated truths neither of them had wanted to face. This changed everything. Not just for Nathan, not just for Maxie, but for Lulu, who now had to decide whether stepping away was an act of sacrifice or an act of self-preservation. Maxie's presence didn't merely shift the dynamic, it forced a new beginning, one none of them were prepared for. And as emotions crackled dangerously close to breaking point, Lulu realized the next chapter of their tangled connections would be defined not by longing, but by truth that was about to reshape all three of their lives in ways none of them could predict.